Hi, my name is Dale Mazzarella. I'm a Fly Fishers International Master Casting Instructor, a longtime Wyoming fishing guide, and an award-winning coach and educator. I've put together this video series that I hope will help you become a better fisherman, catch a lot more fish, and I hope you enjoy it. So enjoy yourself, have a good time, and let me know what you think. Today we're going to be talking about roll casts. And roll casts, a lot of people think that the primary use of a roll cast is when you have obstructions behind you so you don't have to worry about a back cast. And honestly, that's true. That's one of the main reasons. But to tell you the truth, that's not one of the reasons that I most usually employ. You know, I can change directions with a roll cast. I can compensate for the wind with a roll cast. I can take slack out of the line with a roll cast. I can mend with a roll cast. I can cast nymph rigs, big streamers. I can pick up big bass bugs with a roll cast. I can pull sink tip lines out of the water with a roll cast. It's a great way to start some false casting, especially when the river's coming down to you and you've got to fly upstream. You know, we're going to be doing a lot of that in the summer of 2018. And so that's one of the things we're going to really work at, is showing you how to use a roll cast in lots of different kinds of situations. Before we get into the roll cast itself, I'd like to show you a couple things that you can do so that you can practice your roll casting on dry ground instead of in the water, because sometimes practicing roll casting isn't real convenient. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have a roll cast tool. And then all I've done is take a piece of wood, any old piece of wood, take a coping saw and put a slit in it right here. And that way when you put your yarn on the far side of where you want to cast. So if I'm here and I want to cast that direction, I put my yarn over here and my leader through the slit, stick this thing in the ground, and then when I cast, what it does is it provides enough resistance that I can actually make a cast that's going to simulate the meniscus of the water and the tension on the water that helps load your rod. So we're going to show you that. You don't have to do anything this fancy. You can just take a nail, big long nail or a little bitty screwdriver or something from a hardware store, tape a piece of wood on it, take a coping saw blade and cut a little slit in it. What I've found is you need to have a skinny little slot. If you use any blade bigger than a coping saw, it tends to make a slot so big that oftentimes your yarn will get stuck in it and you won't be able to have a cast. The other thing you're going to see is I have a bunch of these little sewing machine screwdrivers, and I stick them in the ground, wrap my leader around it, and stick it in the ground so I can make multiple casts over and over again. And we're going to demonstrate that. But you'll know how I'm anchoring my line, and this is how I anchor my line. What I'm going to do is show you a bunch of little definitions before we start, and some rules of the roll cast before we get to a big rod. And this rod's going to show you that it's very visible. That's why we're going to use it. The first thing, when you get back to here on your roll cast, this is called the D loop. So that's the D loop back there. You've got the straight leg of the D and then the curve of the D. The bigger your D loop is, the more weight you have that's going to help bend this rod, and the longer you're going to cast. This right here is the anchor point. That's where your line comes off the water. So your line is coming off the water right there. If your anchor point is even with you or in front of you, it's going to be less likely to have a good cast. So let me just show you something. So here I am. If I start with my anchor point way in front of me, I'm going to make the best cast I can with my anchor point right there. See, it's having a hard time straightening up. Now watch what happens when I get back here. Straightens up a lot better back here. Now it's much better. This is much harder. It's difficult to get a good cast with your anchor point way. So what you want to do, assuming you have room, you want to get your anchor point as far back as you can and create as big a D loop as you can. The other thing, if that D loop, this is a static D loop right here. That's static. You're just sitting still, everything is still before, and then you make your cast. If your D loop is moving, you're going to see this. If your D loop is moving, that is a dynamic D loop, and that's going to be a better cast also. So the farther back you can get, and then the more dynamic you can get, the farther you can throw this thing. The problem, of course, is with both of those is obstructions behind you. So those are some of the things that we need to know. The other thing, and we're going to get into the technical skills of how to do it. But I want to show you one other thing. This is something people get in trouble with. If I'm, let me get that, there we go. If I'm doing this, I'm going to try to get it straight in front of you so you can see it pretty good. But right here, this is called the railroad tracks. If I have a fly over here, let's say it's over here and I'm going to cast that direction, I can't throw my fly line over the rod tip over the fly line. That's going to tangle my fly. I have to follow the railroad tracks. That's one rail, and now my next rail is going to be next to it, right here. So watch the rail. You can see this, the fly leg is on the left and my rod leg is going to go to the right. If my rod leg crosses my fly leg like this, I'm going to have a problem. That's going to cause a tangle. So you've cast yourself downstream and you get back to here and all of a sudden you want to cast back direction. You can't cast back here because you're going to go over your own line. What you have to do is come back over this shoulder to cast. So we need to learn how to cast off of both shoulders, because in a real situation you can't always cast off of your dominant shoulder. So those are some of the things that I think will help when we get into the actual technique of roll casting. So we're going to show a couple of the roll cast pickup uses when you're fishing. First one is picking up a fly and false casting. This is really valuable when the river's coming towards you and you've thrown up a dry fly up in front and now you're strip. And I see people all the time doing this, trying to get their fly out of the water because the current is creating slack. So what you can do instead, fly's coming down, you just come to here, flip it up, make your cast and cast again. Same thing, you can use the same kind of basic roll cast pickup, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the regular rod, but that roll cast pickup is a valuable tool. The other thing, let's assume that you're in a drift boat and you sit there on the side and all of a sudden it hits a bush and you pull it and you've got all this slack in front of you like this. That guide can't stop that boat. It's going down the boat, it's going down the river at 7 or 8 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour. Boat's going to run over your fly line. If you sit here and try to strip back, you're never going to get it out of the way in time. But if you've got a bunch of slack and you want to get rid of it, boy, you just get a roll cast and bam, you're in business. So roll cast takes out slack really good. The other thing is, for right now, I've got a decent little wind coming on this shoulder. If I cast this way, my fly line's kept away from me. So that way it's not going to hook me. If I make a cast on this side, there's a good chance that that wind is going to blow my fly into my line and cause a tangle. So you can use this in the wind. The other thing we talked about is a change of direction. A roll cast can be used as a change of direction. If I come up here and cast, I can change directions. You can't change directions radically, but my line was there. My line was there. I want to change directions. I can change directions. So you can use that. One other one that I'd like to show you, and I'm not sure if the grass is going to let me do this, but I use a roll cast kind of motion to do a water mend all the time. So you've got your fly right there, and I've got a fast current coming from my left to my right, and I want to mend after it hits the water. Boom, I can mend right there. You can mend all the way to the rod tip. Look at that big, now this fast current, if that red part is in the slow water, I've got a long drift before I get it. So a lot of times what I'll do, and you'll see this summer, I'll pull a line back to here. Let's say I've got a downward current now from my right to my left, and I want to be able to, I pull it, the fly, which is the end of the red mark, red yarn, right above the fish. And maybe the fish is 15 or 20 feet down. Then I just do this. And with that, I can keep doing it. I can just keep making mends. So you can make as many mends as you want to. Let me do that again. You can make as many mends as you want to. And you can get pretty close to the fly. It's tough to do it with this grass. There we go. So now I can do that, I can do this, I can just keep mending. So little mends with the end of your fly line, and you can get a lot of stuff, and it's the same motion. It's coming back and doing this kind of thing. The other thing you can do let's say I want to curve cast to the right, or to your right, my left. I can do a roll cast and still make a curve cast. So I can do a roll cast and make a curve cast. So you can do a lot of things off of a roll cast. It's just a forward cast is all it is. Everything you can do off a regular cast, you can do off a roll cast. a super, super important cast to know and to be able to do well. Let's go through the steps of making a good roll cast. The first one is I'm going to have my rod tip down, and this isn't actually super necessary in actual fishing situations. The point is you just need to take out all of your slack before you get to your D-loop. But the big thing you need to do is you need to move your rod tip to the side. I need to move my rod tip to the side because when I come up, like right now, if I just didn't move my rod tip much to the side and I've got a little breeze right here, my line will wrap around my fly rod and then I'll be in trouble. I can't make a cast. So the first thing you're going to do is move it to the side. If you're going to cast off of this shoulder, you're moving it to that side. If you're going to cast off of this shoulder, you need to move it to this side. Don't try to cast. If there's a fierce wind coming into your casting shoulder, it's going to be awful tough. You want to cast off the opposite shoulder. So we moved it out. So step one is understand where your rod tip is. Step two, out to the side. I'd say 25 or 30 degrees out to the side. Step three, you want to slowly lift your rod. This is important. You want to slowly lift your rod. Even if you're using a dynamic roll cast, you want to slowly lift your rod. If you lift it too fast, what will happen is you'll break free of the surface and you'll shoot a bunch of line behind you and be all tangled. You're going to have to go get your line. So what you want to do is just slowly lift and basically come back, and we're going to start showing this from the other side. But so the stuff you can see from the front that's good is rod tip in an appropriate place, move it to the side of your cast, and then slowly lift to 2 o'clock. So now I'm going to turn around and you'll see this. Rod tip to the side, slowly lift, and I'm going to come to 2 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Now it depends on how much line you have, but let's assume I've got about 45 feet of line to my yarn. So I've got about this much. So step 3, 1, 2, 3 is lift. 4 I check. So 4 is important, check. Make sure you haven't wrapped your rod. Make sure that everything is good. Make sure that your hand, what I like to do is have my hand about even with my head, a little bit maybe my chin. I want to have my rod back at 2 o'clock, which is about 3 fingers between your rod butt and your wrist. And I want to have my reel and my rod aiming at my target. So I'm right here. So that's 4. 5 is we're going to make our forward cast. And the forward cast on a roll cast is a bit different than it is on a regular cast. What I like to do, especially at short lines with a stiff rod, it's pretty important. You can't just boom. What you have to do is just come forward. I like to come forward first, just a little bit of stroke length here, and then at the very end, I want a tip cast. So I'm just going to come forward and tip cast. 6 is follow it down. So let's go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, check. 5, forward cast. 6 down. Now notice also where my rod is stopping. It's stopping pretty high, and when you see me do this full speed, you're going to see if you do this, you're going to get big old fat wide loop. If you do this, it's just boom, pound the tip of that rod tip right into the wall, just like you're pounding a nail, and that's your hammerhead right there. If your hammerhead does this, you're going to bend that nail. So don't bend the nail. It's boom right there into the stop, then follow it down. So let's put all that together and show the 2 drills that I do often with a screw. Now I've got my leader tagged in the ground with a screwdriver. I just wrap it around a screwdriver and stick it in the ground. Step 1, down. 2, to the right. 3, up. 4, check. Got a D-loop, rod's at 2 o'clock. D-loop, none of the lines around my rod, I'm good. Now all I'm going to do is make a forward cast, and remember the railroad. I can't, if my screwdriver is straight in front of me, I can't cast to the right here, I'll tangle. So I have to cast a little bit to the left of my line in this particular case. So I'm just going to go forward. And make a cast. Bring it back. Make another cast. Bring it back, check, everything's good. Make another cast. Go to the other shoulder. I got myself stuck on some grass out there. We go. Go to the other shoulder. Same thing. Down, out, up. Right here. Check. I've got a D-loop. Now my hand may be almost in the same place. if you look at this, my hand is on this side of me. I can move it over here if I want to, but I can also do this as long as my rod tip is on that side. So here I am. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. If I want to avoid the railroad, crossing the railroad tracks, I have to go to the right of my line. Bring it back again, check. Bring it back again, check. And you'll notice how far up my rod is stopping. Let's show what happens if you have too big a casting arc. If I come to here and come to here, I'm going to get a big wide loop, just like you would in a forward cast. So this is cast A, which is a tight loop. This is cast B. Look at the difference in where my rod stops. Big old huge loop. The reason that's a huge loop is because I don't have a straight line rod tip path. What I've got is a curved or a dome-shaped rod tip path. It's the same thing off shoulder. Same thing off shoulder. If you want to make a fairly narrow loop, you have to stop the rod. If you do this, or if you start back too far, if you start back, you're going to get a big loop because my casting arc is way too big. So be aware of your casting arc. What you want to do is make it a nice, neat casting arc. So now Chris, the cameraman, is going to be the guy who's going to put the yarn in my slot. And I'll show you, we're going to put it right in the slot of that stick. I've got my D-loop, I'm ready to go, and now you're going to see an actual cast. By the way, whoever's casting, whoever's putting the yarn in the slot needs to stand on the same side as your casting arm, and you need to be casting for this drill probably to the left a little bit, and this my left, so I'm casting on this side. So here we go. You can see that looks, now you just pull it back right there. He puts it in, probably need two hands. There you go, back to here. There's another one. You can see that straightening out really nice. Now he finds the yarn, puts it back in again. This time I'm going to go to the other side, so Chris needs to get to the other side. Get my D-loop. I've got everything set up. There's my cast. So that's roll casting, awesome tool. You should learn how to do it because I think you'll enjoy it. It's going to save a lot of time, a lot of trouble, very useful in all kinds of situations.